Hello and welcome to the Huddersfield Town preview show in association with Sportsbroker. I'm joined today by Lewis O'Brien and Ali Maxwell. How are you two both doing?
I'm doing well, Lewis. All good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Excellent. Lewis, before we get going, people can see your face quite clearly, so if you just want to explain what you're doing with the moustache on your face for November, that'll be a good place to start, I think.
Yeah, so obviously a few of the lads and a few of the coaching staff have gone together to have moustaches for November. So throughout this whole month, we're going to have some silly looking things on our face, but it's all going to a good cause.
Yeah, we've tweeted out previously a link, and people can find it on your social medias as well if they want to donate, if they can, to the cause.
Is that why when I watched the highlights from the Peterborough game, I made a note that Danny Ward currently looks like an Australian fast bowler?
Yes, I think his is a lot better than mine, and some of the coaching staffs are outstanding. So yeah, they're only going to get worse throughout the month.
Australian fast bowler's a great shout. For me personally, I thought he might look like he's in Sons of Anarchy or something like that, especially with the longer hair at the minute. But his is absolutely fantastic. But if we park that for a minute and speak about football, which is what we're here for, rather than moustache analysis, that's Lewis's other podcast, I think. We'll have a look back at Tuesday night, Lewis. Carlos said after the game that he was disappointed having gone into the lead. But it was another strong performance and point on the road, which we can't turn our noses at. What was the mood in the dressing room like? Was it disappointed the same way the head coach was?
Yeah, obviously we've set our standards very high for the season so far, and for us to go in the lead away at Peterborough, and then for us to concede and only get 1 point out of what we thought we should have got 3, we were all frustrated and disappointed with how we played as a team and how the result ended up, really.
Yeah, it seemed as if we were well on top in the first half. Obviously, Hoggy had to come off injured at half time, and the second half was a bit more even. Was it one of those where we could have perhaps scored earlier, and had we scored earlier, it might have been more like the Blackpool game where we won by 2 or 3, maybe?
Yeah, there's always ifs and buts in every football game, but I mean, you look at the stats of Peterborough at home and the teams that have played, and not many teams go there and get a result. So yeah. I think Bournemouth even went there and didn't score. So for us to get a goal and unfortunately only get a point from it, I mean, we are disappointed. But you've got to look at the positives that we did get a point out of everything.
Yeah, I think that's a great point well made, Lewis, and I think that's only fair to reflect on as well. And I think it's in the context of everything, perhaps with a couple of days away from it, that disappointment of conceding late maybe ebbs away a little bit. Ali, for you, especially, with doing the Not the Top 20 podcast and everything like that, the Championship is always called this league where everyone can get a result from each other. Is the fact that somebody like Peterborough, who are towards the bottom end of the division, the opposite end of the table to us, the fact that they are so hard to beat at home and stuff, is that just indicative of how hard the division is?
Yeah, I think so. I think the other thing to point out is that although Peterborough might be not part of this group of teams, it's a pretty ridiculous league at the moment. Take out the very two at the top in Bournemouth and Fulham, who are looking so strong. But you've got 6 points separating 16 teams from 5th downwards. And that's pretty, we are still early on in the season, but even at this stage, that is unusually close. And I think that's why focusing on a club's league position as some sort of indicator of how good they are or how tough an opposition they are is probably going to be your first mistake if you're a fan looking at the team you're playing against. Well, you might be in 7th place, they might be in 15th place. There's probably only 3 points between you. And even stuff at this stage, like you might have played a game at home more than them. There's so little between teams. And on top of that, you have a side like Peterborough, and we might see this with Barnsley, and we might see this with Cardiff. Any team that goes through a prolonged bad spell, those rarely last for, no team loses every game for 10, 15, 20 games, right? So if you're playing a team that's in 22nd because they've started the season poorly, the chances are in football they're probably going to start putting in some better performances now, whether that comes through a change of manager, a change of formation and tactics, whatever it might be. Teams are rarely very, very poor consistently through 46 games. So definitely the old cliche that there's no easy game in the league holds true at the moment.
Is that something that sort of reflected in the analysis you guys do, Lewis? I know you guys obviously prepare the same way for every team and take everybody as seriously as the next team, but the fact that the division's so tight and it is so competitive, is that stuff that you guys are acutely aware of when you're doing your prep and doing your training, your meetings?
Yeah, I mean, like you both said, anyone can beat anyone in this league, and I think you've just got to take every game as they come and think that every team is the best team that you're going to face and go into the game ready for a battle, ready for a challenge, and hopefully overcome that. But you've got to go into every game thinking that they are the best team in the league and they're going to be the best team you're going to face, so you can be ready for everything that gets thrown at you.
Bournemouth lost the other night for the first time as well, so it's one of those where you know, even those positive records towards the top of the league, you don't know now if they're going to go on a run of losing 2 or 3, because as soon as momentum goes, it's not as if there's a lot of time between matches. For you, Ali, when you look at a team like Town, we've obviously started this season a lot more positively than we have done for a few years, and seem to have sort of really found our feet with the squad we have and the manager a year in. What about the team for you is been behind this form and behind our current league position and everything?
I think certainly compared to last season, there are a few things that are very clearly going better this season. Some of them are on the pitch, and some of them, well, one of the key ones has to be that, albeit no team is unaffected by injuries, it feels like Town last season were constantly up against it in the treatment room, and I can only imagine how frustrating that is, both for the individual players themselves, the squad as a whole, and of course for the head coach too and his staff. So that was clearly holding you guys back last season. It's the same for a lot of clubs who struggle with the intensity of the schedule. This season there are some teams who are having a horrendous time of it. Reading at the moment, already with quite a thin squad after a transfer embargo over the summer, and probably 8 first-team injuries. Their whole bench at the moment is an under-23s bench. So I feel like, and tell me if I'm wrong, I'm sure there have been knocks picked up here and there. You guys are in pretty good health in general. That's always going to make a big difference. And fair play for Carlos Corberán, who didn't make too many excuses last season, even when he probably could have. Certainly the addition of the set-piece threat is something that was we didn't see coming, right? So I think I'm right in saying that it's 10 goals from set pieces, 9 goals from open play. It's pretty rare for a team to score more from set plays from open play. We were talking about it on the podcast on Monday and discussing whether, you know, sometimes when a team improves that much in that area of the game, it could be that there's a new coach that's been hired who specifically works on these, or it could be just a case of Sorba Thomas having the best delivery in the world and probably even better than someone like Trent Alexander-Arnold. And with the whip and dip that he gets and the trajectory with the new defenders who are attacking the ball so well up from the back, maybe that's the case. So I'm interested to know if there's some specialist set piece coach involved, or whether it's mostly all about Sorba.
Lewis, can you shed some light on the Town set pieces for us?
He's our coach. He's very dedicated to the set pieces, and I don't think he overcomplicates what we're doing from set pieces, and it's very easy for everyone to understand. And I mean, like you said, Ali, we've got players now that want to attack the ball. I think last year I was in the box, and at 5'8", I'm not the biggest to go win a header, and now you've got 3, 4, 5 people aggressively attacking the ball and let the players do what they're good at, and it seems to be working.
I would just say one more thing on that front is, and the third thing I was going to mention is, and you know, I don't mean to criticise at all, but we have to analyse team strengths and weaknesses. And last season, I really felt that it was difficult to trust Town to keep a clean sheet. It was difficult to put it this way. There were a lot of teams in the league who seemed a little bit more solid. And so even though I really enjoyed the style of play right from the start of the season, I know that got disrupted a little bit by injuries. I really enjoy watching Carlos's team play. I like listening to him talk about the game in his press conferences. I think he's a brilliant head coach in this league and a welcome addition to it. And last season, I guess I was just a bit disappointed at how tough Town seem to find it to keep a clean sheet. So that's clearly something that's improved again this season. New personnel at the back. I guess fewer injuries makes a big difference to that as well. More consistency, but certainly an obvious improvement this season.
Is that defensive improvement? Because it's something we've touched on across the season, Lewis, because it's evident. I think statistically it was the worst defence in the Championship last year, and it's certainly not the case now. Obviously, we've got Matty, Tom, Levi, who's come in, Lee in goal. So the personnel's completely changed at the back, but also the system has changed. The way we choose to defend, and it's not so man-to-man anymore. It's a little bit more lower block and things like that. Is that what's all behind how our defence has changed and why we're a bit more solid this season than we may have been last year?
Yeah, I mean, last season was great football to play in. I mean, we were very expansive, played out from the back in defence, which against very good teams, you get opened up, and you've seen that against Norwich, against Bournemouth last season. We conceded quite a few goals, and like you said, we were the worst defence in the league, but we've obviously gone away from that as a whole squad, the coaching staff, the players. Obviously, the new additions help a lot, but we've changed our ways and we've focused on the things that we needed to improve on. And as you can tell, we have been focusing on it hard and we have been improving on it very well.
I like the fact that I was tiptoeing around it a bit, worried that I was going to get some stick if I was too harsh and, saying it was tough to keep a clean sheet. And both of you have just come out and said the worst defensive record in the league. So I'm starting to realise that you guys just say it as it is. And that's a good thing.
Yeah, you've got to be honest in this game or you won't get anywhere, to be fair. So
we are a Yorkshire club as well, Ali, and we don't dance around things here. If the statistics the way it was, that's the way it is, and as Lewis says, you don't get anywhere hiding from anything, and it's it's a huge positive for us that is no longer the case. So I think we say it as a positive, as a reflection of how well we've improved, rather than wearing it as a badge of honour or anything like that. Sort of, Lewis, for you this season, obviously the new contract to start the year and your form and how you're playing positionally and things, you seem to be a little bit more box to box and getting forward, and there was a few times in the second half against Peterborough where you'd make a darting run and you'd be the one that would play the pass out wide. Is that something you're enjoying this year, the fact that you've got license to roam and as well as doing your hard work defensively with Hoggy or with Alex or with Scott, as the case was in the second half, you still have that ability to go forward and join in the attacks?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we've changed system a lot and players and personnel and positions change. So I think at the start of my career, when I was at Bradford in the first season at Huddersfield, I played a similar role to what I'm playing now. So it's very comfortable for me to play a role like this. But Carlos has been very certain on trying me to get in the box and trying to create attacks. So when we do get forward, I do consciously think about trying to get forward and trying to get into them ending positions to finish the attacks.
Ali, for you, when you see a player like Lewis, who's obviously one of the stronger midfielders in the division, and he's so sort of expressive in the way he plays, is that a real sort of asset for a club as Huddersfield, who are now looking towards the top of the league, to having there a player as dynamic in the midfield? Because they're few and far to come between, and for us to have one that we've had created from our own academy, that's a real positive, isn't it?
Yeah, you're so spot on there, and that there are certain things that are easily recognisable in players from, even if you're trying like we are to cover 72 teams and you're watching as many highlights as possible, but maybe you're not always seeing full 90s and you don't know the ins and outs of every single player. There are some players that stand out because of their technical ability. So in a highlight, they might stand out because they've made a really good forward pass or whatever that might be. And there are so many other parts to being particularly a central midfielder and a very good all-rounder and effective central midfielder in the modern game. And I think Lewis does stand out in the highlights because of the way that he carries the ball, because he's an offensive threat and he plays good, penetrative forward passes as well. But I know from when I have watched full 90s and when I've kept a close eye on Lewis, because he's someone that we've tracked ourselves ever since he was on loan in League Two, is with Bradford City, is the energy out of possession, the absolute desire to win the ball back, and not not pressing for pressing's sake and not diving into tackles and getting beaten and leaving your fellow midfielders exposed, but always doing it in the right way, using that natural stamina and energy and speed across the pitch. I mean, that is, in the modern game, probably more important than ever. The speed of the game has improved, has quickened so much over the last 10, 20 years, and that's clearly now an even bigger attribute. So I think the thing I've always liked about Lewis in the last few seasons is how he's kind of system proof in being such an all-rounder. There's a space for Lewis in any midfield, whereas there might be certain midfielders who you wouldn't trust to play in a 2, or there might be midfielders who you think actually in a 3 we could probably spread out the qualities of the other midfielders and we wouldn't necessarily need that guy. Lewis is system proof. He can play in any midfield, and that's just such a valuable thing.
There you go, Lewis. That's worth your time on coming on just to hear that, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it's not bad, that, is it?
And I think it's all true as well. But for you, Lewis, is that something you're consciously aware of bringing into your game and stuff you work on? Because when we speak to other lads and when they talk about the energy and the work rate, especially the hard work that Carlos expects from you guys, they all say this is the fittest I felt. This is the most intense I've ever played. It's not quite on Lewis O'Brien levels, but that's the line we get from everyone. Is that something you're aware of?
No, I 100% agree with everyone that says it. I mean, I'd say exactly the same. I'm the fittest I've ever been, and there's things in the background which you look at and you probably weren't the best at. Maybe last season, my nutrition probably weren't the best, and the club have brought people in to help us with that. And it's just the little things, the 1% to 2% that make you even better than what you were. And personally, I look at every game back as detailed as I can on myself and try and improve day to day on everything that I can.
Yeah, I think that's honest. I think the reflection on how the club supports and everything is true as well, because we see it here at Canalside. The nutrition you guys get, the meetings and prep you guys get is all sort of first class and couldn't be more detailed, could it, Lewis?
No, I mean the chefs, the nutritionists, from every member of staff that we get, analysts, everyone. I mean, they go into as much depth as they can with everything, and they make the best possible opportunity for us to thrive every game. Yeah.
Ali, if we take the opportunity to just cast our eyes forward to the weekend in Cardiff, you were speaking of sides who were struggling and on great runs, and Cardiff, it's fair to say, unfortunately for them, are one of them. They're in a holding pattern at the minute between managers. They might hold on to who's in charge at the minute, or they might hire from outside after Mick McCarthy's left. Could you just give us a bit of a lowdown and an overview of what we've to expect from them and what position they're in at the moment?
Yeah, of course. I mean, they're in a very, very low place right now. Even having moved on from Mick McCarthy, I think the first game under Steve Morrison was last weekend against Stoke City. Steve Morrison, a lot of the viewers and dare I say a lot of the players will remember probably having played against when he was playing up top for Millwall when they first came up to the Championship a couple of years ago. An absolutely formidable competitor. Of all the people I've worked with in football media, he is probably the one that I am most scared of, having met in the flesh. So in a sense,
the leather off of football, that man, couldn't he?
Yeah, but he's also not afraid to say it how it is and in fairly strong words. And I wonder whether that was maybe a different voice in the dressing room might have helped in their comeback against Stoke, because they were desperate in the first half. They were 3-0 down. It was more of the same. They'd lost 8 games in a row at that point, and they were 3-0 down just after half time. And I mean, whether it was Cardiff suddenly turning it on, whether it was Stoke City's sloppy mistakes, Michael O'Neill certainly put it down to the latter. There were some pretty glaring individual errors at the back for Stoke. But in fairness, Cardiff did come roaring back, and Kiefer Moore and a youngster called Mark Harris, who came off the bench and brought amazing speed in behind. They kind of exploited Stoke's very high line. They came back and drew that 1-3-3. And I guess at that point, you think, naturally, can we use that amazing second half, a point that we certainly wouldn't have expected when we were 3-0 down? Can we use that in the next game? We're going home in midweek. We're playing against QPR, a good side, but we shouldn't be scared of them. This could be the turnaround. And actually, they were very poor last night in defeat at home to QPR. The goal that they conceded, for a team that likes to sit deep, that plays with 3 centre-backs and 2 fairly defensive-minded midfielders in front of them, for a straight ball from Dozzell, the QPR midfielder, to go straight through the heart of their back line, along the ground, into the feet of Andre Gray to turn and finish, it's indicative of what they've been like over the last 10 games or so. So it's just 1 point in 10. That's about as bad as it gets. And to an extent, that means it's a good time to play this Cardiff side, because perhaps in future weeks they might improve. But maybe this is the point that they do improve. That's got to be the worry. And I suppose that's why you have to prepare for this game in the same way as you would if you were preparing to play against Fulham or Bournemouth. Having said that, in terms of style of play, very different to those two sides. Actually, if you just look at a formation on paper, not too dissimilar to the way that Huddersfield Town play. That they'll play 3 at the back. They'll have wing backs. They'll have 2 central midfield players, more defensive minded, certainly than Lewis. And they'll have 2 sort of inside forwards in or wide players behind Kiefer Moore, most likely up front. So shape-wise, it's similar. The interpretation is slightly different. I know that the Huddersfield back 3 are certainly very comfortable on the ball. I know you've said you mix it up a little bit this season. You're more comfortable going long rather than always going short, but you certainly be more likely to see Colwill, Lees, etc., passing it between themselves and waiting patiently for good forward passes into midfield or out wide than the Cardiff centre-backs who are they kind of treat the ball like a hot potato, and that they will try and hit Kiefer Moore pretty early on. So it's not a new threat at this level. I know Huddersfield have played Millwall, they've played Birmingham this season. Those 2 sides are a lot better at doing what they do than Cardiff City have been recently, but that's the sort of aerial threat that you'll have. Defending your box, your 6-yard box, the penalty spot area will be absolutely crucial. And also similarly to Huddersfield, I was trying to think about sort of key players, key threats for them. You guys have got Sorba Thomas creating just an insane amount of chances from out wide. And I would say Cardiff's equivalent is Ryan Giles, who's on loan from Wolves. He's a small, very, very speedy left-sider. He's been playing left wing-back the last few games, so he's running deep with the ball and crossing. His delivery is absolutely excellent. And up front, you've got Kiefer Moore up top, who I think him and Danny Ward are both doing a really good job at the moment, probably underrated with what they're doing out of possession and in hold-up play, maybe more so than goal scoring. But, just a word of warning is seeing that Peterborough goal from midweek. That was a left wing-back whipping in a really good delivery and a tall striker pinning himself at the back post and using a bit of strength and a bit of nous and heading home. So that's basically Cardiff's key threat for me, Giles crossing for more. So, that's, from my eyes anyway, got to be an area of focus for Huddersfield when thinking about Cardiff's threats. But I would expect you guys to dominate possession and hopefully be able to play through Cardiff. They haven't been that well structured defensively recently. That's
a great preview, Ali. Thank you very much for that. Lou, I'm going to throw a couple of stats your way. Obviously, Ali's just been through Cardiff struggles at the minute, but historically speaking, we've not been to Cardiff and won since 2001. The other statistic for me is earlier on in this season we had Nottingham Forest at home and they hadn't won yet this year, but we lost 2-0 on that occasion. So we know how dangerous teams can be when they are on a bad run and when they're desperate for a result. I know the prep we'll have put in is as detailed and as an intense as we will have done for any other game this season. But how do you guys sort of approach this sort of task mentally, knowing that Cardiff will be wounded, knowing that they are going to be tough to break down and they will be desperate for a result before the international break?
Yeah, I mean, you both said it perfectly. Like, you come into games like this and they're probably one of the toughest games that you're going to face. We had exactly the same thing at Forest, where they're in a similar position now. Cardiff, they're on a losing streak. They're in the process of like changing managers, and it comes to the bit where every player is going to play the hardest to impress either the current manager or the new manager coming in. So I think it is probably the toughest test you will have as a team, because teams that are playing well, they're going to be playing well. But it's kind of an unknown what's going to happen on Saturday for Cardiff, because they're obviously a very, very good team and a very massive threat especially as Ali said, from set pieces and crosses, and we've got to have to concentrate as hard as we can to try and get the 3 points from it.
Excellent. I think that's a good place to leave it, and hopefully we can talk on extra time after that Cardiff City game on Saturday and look back on a positive result. But Lewis, thank you very much for taking the time on your day off. Ali, thank you very much for joining us for the. Ali, thanks very much for joining us for the first time. Hopefully you'll want to come on again at some point down the line. And thank you again to Sportsbro for sponsoring the show.